2008.
By the time their son was born, the family, now established within the community, were living in a terraced house on leafy Victoria Crescent in the capital, St Helier, along with Isabella's father, Marek. Damien had secured work as a foreman's assistant and was employed on various building sites around the island.
Damien was described as a hard-working man and loving father, supporting his family and providing for his family. Isabella was always described by all of their friends as a loving mother. He would spend most of her time taking care of their children and making sure that the dinner was ready when Damien came home. She would bake her own bread and she would take kids for walks and play with them in front of the flat. Isabella's and Damien's friends believed that they were a happy couple and a typical young marriage with 2 young children.
But this picture-perfect exterior was a far cry from the truth. Cracks were beginning to appear in their 6-year marriage. Damien and Isabella wanted different futures. Krzyzewski was keen for the family to return to Poland and was saving for a house there, whilst his wife saw their future in Jersey. As tensions grew, the couple decided to take a holiday in their native country in the summer of 2011, a break that was meant to bring them closer together.
Damien and Isabella returned from their holiday in Poland on the 14th of August 2011. They'd driven all the way from Poland, and Damien was the only driver. So he was driving for over 23 hours straight. They arrived in St Helier about 8 o'clock in the morning and went straight to their flat in Victoria Crescent.
Sunday, the 14th of August 2011, was a perfect summer's day on the island. Despite the exhausting car journey home, Damien and Isabella decided to have a barbecue, inviting Isabella's best friend Marta and her daughter Julia to join them.
At around 12:30, Isabella and her father Marek left the flat to go and collect Marta and Julia, and at the same time Damien was left at home to take care of the 2 children.
Yet in their absence, the father of 2 made a decision that was to shock his wife.
When Isabella, Marek, and both girls, Marta and Julia, arrived back at the address, Isabella realized that kids were home alone.
Minutes later, Damien returned, and unable to explain where he'd been, was confronted by his furious wife.
Neighbors could hear some raised voices.
It was to be the last argument they would ever have.
First 999 calls were dialed at 14:58. One of the witnesses saw Damien chasing Isabella down the street whilst attacking her.
On the 14th of August 2011, the tranquility of peaceful island life on Jersey was shattered when a family barbecue ended in bloodshed.
Initially, it was difficult to realise what was actually happening. They could clearly hear Isabella screaming and shouting, and they could see Damien stabbing her with a knife.
I was on my way to my daughter's flat because we'd just moved her into La Villa Rothsay, which is a flat alongside the Victoria Crescent. And I received a phone call from her to say, Dad, I think there's been a stabbing. When I arrived, there was blue lights and mayhem everywhere. As I went up to her flat, I noticed there were some people working on a casualty down by the side of the flat in an entranceway, doing compressions, counting compressions.
I was one of the first on the scene, and my priority is to establish command and control. It was a chaotic scene, and it did take a few minutes to try and reconcile what was happening. There were almost small pockets of incidents within a big incident, and even till a later time, it didn't really become clear what was happening. Knowing the training that Martin had, I saw him arrive and saw him as being advantageous to the cause, and requested that he try and help us, which he did, thankfully.
It was still a very fast-moving event at that stage. The magnitude and the scale of what had happened remained unclear. As I went into the flat, I saw two police officers working on somebody by the entrance door to a lounge. I was introduced to them very quickly as an off-duty fireman, and I can help. And they immediately looked at me and said, help. So I immediately put some breaths into the casualty and noticed there was a lot of gurgling going on. And I said, I'm going to just feel for a pulse, because they said they couldn't feel a pulse. I couldn't trace one either. And as I did that, I looked and I noticed that there was still a knife in the casualty's back, and I said, whoa, we're going to need to move that. And they went, no, we can't. And a couple of thoughts went through my head. I need to remove it because I need to get him on his back. And then I'm thinking, well, if I remove it, more catastrophic bleeding. There was enough blood around anyway. So I tried a couple more breaths and was unsuccessful. I felt for another pulse, and I said, guys, I think we've lost this guy. I said, I think he may be dead. I checked a watch and called a timeout and said, I think we've lost him.
Isabella's father, Marek, died where he fell, having been stabbed 9 times.
There's a point where I recall the first death being declared, and at that point I already recognised the gravity of the incident. There were some very serious injuries, but at the time of that death I knew that because of what moved in front of her, this most certainly was a murder inquiry, and I declared it as such. And from that point, again with my training and background, I knew the severity and the right pitch to place on this incident, notwithstanding the overriding response for some time was to try and save life.
With one man dead, the police were faced with a large-scale investigation. But the situation was about to get much worse.
It was then that I looked through the doorway into the lounge and saw a baby on the floor, and I thought, whoa, what's wrong with the baby? Don't know, has the baby been checked? And couldn't feel a pulse, and saw that there was quite a lot of blood around the baby. So I checked again, double-checked, treble-checked, couldn't feel anything. I said, I think the baby's gone.
The baby was Casper, stabbed 13 times. He died, aged just 2 years old.
I was aware that we did have an attacker still outstanding. My role was to command the scene, but also try and safeguard the other people that were attending to victims.
As emergency services tried to secure the scene, they were to make more gruesome discoveries.
So we searched around in the flat and went through to a back room, and there was somebody face down in the back room, but it moved. So I just said, we've got somebody alive in here, and went in there straight away.
That man was Damian Rzeszowski, who at first looked like another victim.
The casualty sort of moved, and I turned him over and noticed there was lots of stab wounds. He was half naked from the chest down. There was lots of stab wounds all over the body. The casualty was moaning and conscious and was trying to get themselves comfortable. He was moving around a bit more, and I noticed when he moved his arms that he'd cut his wrists as well. So I'm thinking, this guy might be the perpetrator here. So I asked him his name, and he told me his name, Damien. And I asked him some questions. Was there anybody else in the house? Things like that. And he said, yes, yeah. How many? He said 6, he thinks. So I just said to the policeman, there's other people in here. We need to look for other people.
With 2 victims dead and 1 man seriously injured, this information meant 4 more people had potentially been attacked in the house.
As the incident unfolded, more and more casualties come to light. And that was particularly distressing when children are involved, and they were getting found as we looked deeper into the incident. That was very difficult to deal with, and I think that caused both myself and my colleagues and others that were responding to this a great deal of distress.
Officers quickly realized that nobody had been spared, discovering 2 more females and 2 other children with horrific injuries.
4 victims were taken to the hospital, all females. So Kinga, Julia, Isabella, and Marta. Kacper and Marek both died at the scene, inside the flat.
It became, this is my job now, I just need to get through this and do the very best I can. Really focus on my job and doing the very best we could to try and stop that position getting any worse.
As the girls were rushed to hospital with multiple stab wounds, the only conscious person amid the devastation was 31-year-old Damian Rzeszowski.
Damien, for me, was another casualty, and he got treated exactly the same as the others in terms of we did our very best to try and preserve his life.
The last casualty in the house, Rzeszowski, was by now in a critical condition, having repeatedly stabbed himself.
I was trying to keep the patient conscious and talking because obviously he was losing a lot of blood. He was drifting in and out of consciousness and moaning quite a lot. But the fact that he was breathing and that he was moving was a good thing, so we just treat his wounds. The ambulance chief arrived and some more paramedics arrived with some equipment, so we started dressing the wounds with some big wound pads, dressed his wrists, dressed his chest. Realised we couldn't really carry him out, so I called for the chair. We were going to chairlift him out, so we made him as comfortable as we could. Took him outside, put him in the ambulance, spoke to the police. Obviously the police had been listening to what I'd saying, and I said this guy may have been the perpetrator. During that stage, the police inspector came in and found a knife by the door and just picked it up, and I went, whoa, didn't notice that when I went in. I think that may have been the knife that he used to stab himself, and may have been the knife that he used to stab other victims. I didn't know at the time.
The attacks had happened in almost every room of the small flat. Officers were now faced with one of the biggest crime scenes ever to hit the island.
I do remember a phase that followed Damien where once all the casualties had left the scene, the second phase, if you like, then kicked in terms of investigation, which was trying to preserve as best you can what was left behind.
It's often referred to as the golden hour in police speak, police parley. We recognise the importance of securing and preserving evidence. You only get one chance at a crime scene, and as soon as you've been through it or you've released it, it's gone and you can't go back again.
We had to pull the officers away from the area that had been dealing with such traumatic circumstances and then deal really clinically with what we had, which was a murder scene.
While the crime scene was secured and police tried to uncover what had happened at Victoria Crescent, the horrific news was starting to break.
The media interest started to build up. The local community wanted to know what would happen, as did the island's leaders, of course, and trying to establish the facts was actually quite challenging during those initial hours.
I had to go and collect one of my boys. So as I'm leaving the terrace, because the police are all over the place, there's very little you could do at the time, and they were making sure everybody was staying away. I just sent a tweet out saying, Victoria Crescent incident, avoid the area.
I was up in St Peters at my girlfriend's place, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and I remember just flicking on my Facebook, and that's how I got to know about it, because actually it was reported on Facebook before I heard anything in the media. I think people who were close by to the scene were reporting updates on Facebook, so it was really probably one of the first crimes in Jersey that was broken on social media, I would say.
It was soon after that social media as a whole just exploded, with Facebook and Twitter, with people sending questions out, making comments. People thought it was a madman run amok.
Despite the social media frenzy, details of the tragedy were still limited, as more and more islanders heard the news.
It was a lovely sunny afternoon, and I'd been invited to a colleague's barbecue, and I got a phone call saying, can you come into work? An incident's happened and we may need you as a family liaison officer. The phone call indicated that there had been an incident involving knives and there may be children involved. I didn't realise when I first came into work the extent of the incident. It was when I got to the hospital. It was chaotic. It had been closed down. It was professional people in there only, and I was asked to assist the doctor, and when I went into the first room we were asked to pronounce life extinct on 4 victims who had been involved in the incident, who had been stabbed to death. And then we had to try and identify who the victims were, because no one had any identification with them.
As family liaison officers began the harrowing task of identifying the victims, family and friends were by now frantically trying to reach their loved ones.
One of the victims' mobile kept ringing and receiving messages, so we kind of worked out from that the mobile number that was sending the messages. And my colleague was back here looking up that data and managed to identify a relative, and went and spoke to that relative to see if they had any family who were in that vicinity that day. The person that was ringing was Craig Dillahay. He was trying to locate his wife Marta and his daughter Julia, because they should have been home at 6 o'clock that evening, and they hadn't returned. Craig already had an inkling that something was not right. He had been out for the afternoon, he was waiting for them to come back. When they hadn't came back, he had tried to phone his dad, couldn't get hold of his father. He went on his Facebook and he noticed there was comments that there had been an incident with fatalities at Victoria Crescent, and he started to panic because he knew that's where Marta and Julia were.
The police faced devastating circumstances. 6 people lay dead, attacked in the space of 15 minutes. And 1 man appeared to be the prime suspect. With life-threatening injuries inflicted on himself, the only man alive from this gruesome massacre would lie in hospital for hours before being questioned.
He was heavily sedated on the Sunday evening due to his own injuries. He had a number of stab injuries, as we know, self-inflicted to his torso. I think he had a punctured and collapsed lung, so he wasn't in a good way himself, so he was heavily sedated. I think it was the following day when he was conscious and we were confident that he was awake and he knew what was happening. I made the decision that he was a suspect. I declared him as a suspect. He remained in hospital for a week to 10 days under police guard, and he was arrested on suspicion of 6 murders.
Heavily guarded and now the prime suspect, what would Damian Rzeszowski reveal about the slaying of his wife, her father, friend, and 3 small children? In August of 2011, the States of Jersey police launched their first murder inquiry in 7 years. 3 children under the age of 5 and 3 adults had been stabbed to death in cold blood, seemingly by a man they knew well. Why had a happy family barbecue ended in a massacre?
The lenses through which we come to understand the family annihilator are lenses that we only put on post-event. And the 2 classic reactions post-event from extended family, from friends, or from neighbors is that this is something they could never have predicted. This is just so out of character. This was a loving husband, a wonderful father.
As people struggled to understand why a father would be driven to kill, some spoke out about changes they saw prior to the tragedy.
Damon's friends saw a difference in him at around June, July 2011. They couldn't really say what was causing his different behaviour, but they said that indeed he was very quiet, but you could tell that there was tension in him. However, he wouldn't talk about what was bothering him.
The second lens is often, yeah, we did notice changes. We noticed that they never talked about what might be worrying them, but it was quite clear that there were some underlying issues. And in that sense, one hears a lot about Damian being described as being a pressure cooker, as if he was about to explode.
Damian's world changed when his plans to build a home in Poland fell through, and his wife delivered a devastating blow.
Around that time, Isabella informed Damian that she was having an affair. And she told him at the same time that it's finished. She will not see that person again.
Damian had a very traditional, hegemonic, masculine approach to his relationship with his partner and in his relationship towards his children, and that was a very kind of stereotypical picture of what it meant to be male, what it meant to be in a relationship, and therefore one gets the sense that ultimately his decision to annihilate his family came from his belief that somehow his wife had fallen short of the standards that he had expected.
They were having some difficulties in their marriage. But then again, I think every marriage sometimes struggles with different things.
Shortly following Isabella's admission, Rzeszowski hit rock bottom.
In July 2011, Damian attempted suicide. He took an overdose and spent the night in hospital. Following that, Damon and Isabella decided to try and work on their marriage again, try and save their marriage.
Despite the bombshell, the couple were keen to save their crumbling marriage, and the family holiday back to Poland was key to building it back up.
Isabella's relatives, they seemed very happy. They would say that Damon, trying to help everyone, he was very polite. There was nothing that would concern them in any way whatsoever.
Yet somewhere along the way, the tension still ran high on the return.
You're looking to sort of build up a picture as to recent movements, recent contacts, who they'd spoken to, ultimately to try and find out what had happened and why.
Isabella's best friend Marta and her daughter Julia were keen to welcome them back from their holiday.
Isabella and Marta first met through a babysitter. They've been friends for quite a few years. They both treated each other as best friends, and they would go either clubbing or to see a movie or do something together. I know they were very close.
They knew they were back that day and were desperate to see them, and they had decided that they were going to go there for the day. Craig didn't want to go. He was at home with his other daughter and her friend because they had been asleep over there, so he decided to stay at home with them that afternoon.
It was to be the last time Craig would ever see his wife and daughter alive.
Everything started shortly after the barbecue had finished. We believe that 3 children were all in the front room of the flat. Catspaw was sat on a chair at the dining table playing with some toys. Kinga was painting. She was very close to Catspaw, and Julia was just a couple of steps away from them. We believe that at least Isabella was together with the kids in the living room, supervising them.
Damien used 2 kitchen knives that in all probability he took from a knife block in the kitchen.
We believe that the first person to be attacked was Marek, Isabella's dad.
Instrumentally, by killing the only other adult man first, he is removing immediately the one person who physically might have been able to have overcome him and prevent the family annihilation.
At that time, he was sad watching some television. During that attack, he didn't move at all. This attack was actually very brutal. The knife used by Damien remained in Marek's body, actually stuck in his spinal cord. This compromised Marek's ability to walk. He literally crawled his way into the hallway and towards the living room.
As Marek made a desperate attempt to move, Zhuzhovsky quickly found his next victim.
Catspaw was attacked whilst he was playing with some car toys, and he was stabbed 5 times to his chest. He remained seated, but slammed onto a table with his back exposed. He received further 8 stab wounds to his back, and he fell to the floor where he died shortly after. Kinga was just next to him. She sustained altogether 16 stab wounds, 3 to the chest and some 13 to her back. Then Julia was attacked also in the living room, and she also sustained 16 stab wounds to both front and back. She was attacked twice, first time in that living room, but we do know that at some point she got up off the floor and made her way towards the hallway where she was attacked for the second time. And she fell to the floor and didn't move from there.
His wife would have viewed those other murders taking place and have been powerless to have done anything to have prevented those murders. So there's a way in which she is being punished, even in the order of the victims that has been chosen. Her best friend's daughter, and her own children. She is powerless to prevent this. It prolonged her pain, not only her pain physically, but her pain psychologically.
After witnessing the brutality of the attacks on those closest to her, Isabella made a desperate attempt to flee for her life.
We believe that Isabella was first attacked, either in that living room or the hallway. There was a bloody palm print on the wall just next to the door to the living room. She sustained 3 stab wounds to the chest that were fatal. However, for a short period of time, she was still able to move. And she ran through the flat, ran through the hallway to 2 bedrooms, trying to escape from Damien. Whilst in that bathroom, Isabella made a desperate attempt to contact emergency services using Marek's phone. She actually dialed 997, which is a Polish emergency number. She then dropped the phone and ran out of the bathroom into the hallway. Around that time, Marta was exiting the flat. We are not sure where she was first attacked, but we do know it happened inside because her blood was found on the inside of the door. Isabella left the flat and ran down the road, screaming and shouting, asking for help. Damien followed her outside, and at some point he caught up with her and attacked her again, stabbing her to her back.
If you are stabbing someone, you are literally putting a knife that you're holding into their body. You feel the body, the blood will spurt from the body onto you. Often you will be looking into the eyes of the person that you are killing. This is a very personal form of murder.
The witnesses started shouting at Damien. We believe he pointed the knife towards them in an attempt to stop them from getting any closer. And then he walked back inside the flat, stabbing himself in the chest and closed the door behind him.
He fits that classic picture of the family annihilator who is seeking revenge on a partner who has let him down, and then also attempting to take his own life so that the criminal justice system can't judge him. He'll be his own judge, as it were. And the fact that he has survived means, therefore, there are problems for the criminal justice system.
Damien was found laying bloodstained in a small back bedroom, and the knife was beside him. That was secured, and that was obviously the second knife that he used.
Any murder's bad, and everyone deals with, with hearing that news in their own way. But I think when you hear that children are involved, I think that just throws a complete different dimension to the whole incident. It kind of leaves you pretty speechless, and I think the whole community in Jersey were just absolutely shocked by it.
As the community mourned, one vital question still remained unanswered. Why did Damien Rzeszowski kill his family?
If someone can kill 6 people, then you do question what was the guy's mental state at the time.
How do we make sense of this man's behaviour? Should we see this man's behaviour as unique and without parallel and based on some of the underlying mental health problems that he has? Or should we simply see this as another piece in the jigsaw of this criminological phenomenon called family annihilation?
You can hypothesise as to, what the trigger was. Clearly there were domestic issues at play here. We'll never know why, I guess, Damien's actions extended beyond Isabella.
What made a loving father massacre his entire family and their friends? Damien Rzeszowski, a 31-year-old Polish immigrant, was now the #1 suspect in the brutal killing of his wife, children, father-in-law and friends. As police searched for the motive, the people of Jersey united in their grief and rallied round to show their sympathy and support to the victims' families.
I attended the funerals and tried to support some of the friends of the family, as well as family members that were present. And I have to say, I didn't see a single person in that church that wouldn't cry.
All 6 victims were repatriated back to Poland for burial in their homeland, but not before memorial services had been held for them in Jersey. Mother and daughter Marta and Julia were buried in the same coffin, a heartbreaking reminder of how they had died together.
There were some police officers, friends, but also strangers, and it just made me feel so proud of Jersey community because they all paid respect to the innocent victims of the horrific crime.
But justice was still to come. 12 months following the massacre, Jersey was under the spotlight for one of the most highly anticipated trials ever seen. Grzeszowski, by now, had undergone extensive psychiatric tests at one of the UK's top security hospitals. But what would this reveal?
We knew from one of the early pre-trial hearings that Damien Grzeszowski, he accepted responsibility for the deaths by submitting a plea of manslaughter, which of course wasn't acceptable to us. We felt this was a case of murder.
A devastating blow for officers on the case. Grzeszowski claimed diminished responsibility, apparently hearing voices in his head on the day, and revealing how the weeks prior were filled with rows with his wife, depression, and heavy drinking. But the prosecution argued very differently, claiming that Grzeszowski switched his story during his medical assessments, casting doubts on his authenticity. The court heard how they felt he was in fact very controlling, with a history of violence, who ultimately couldn't handle the anger he felt towards his wife for her infidelity. In short, he was a pressure cooker who one day blew.
I'm perfectly happy to accept that he has diminished responsibility, but within the events themselves, it seems to me that there was a chilling Gothic clarity about the order in which he chose his victims and the method by which he killed his victims. There was a lot of conscious behaviour in terms of what he did, and that conscious behaviour suggests that at the moment that he committed these killings, there was a greater reasoned process that he was going through than I think was ultimately allowed for in court.
I wouldn't begin to want to delve into somebody's mind that would make them do something like that. It was horrific. All I know is that something like that is pretty horrific, and for a father to do that to his children and his loved ones is beyond me.
After a highly charged trial lasting 10 days, the verdict sent shockwaves through the people of Jersey and the rest of the world.
In August, Grzeszowski was cleared of murder. He admitted the killings, but his defense argued that he was suffering moderate to severe depression, causing an onset of psychotic symptoms, which diminished his responsibility.
I didn't want to see him come out of prison, that's for certain, because I think the crimes that he committed were pretty horrendous.
The controversial verdict meant Grzeszowski would not be